Delighted to have you all here with us today for the special event. We've got a packed agenda for you over the next hour, and I'll share some brief opening remarks, and then we'll hear from our special guest speaker, JP Gownder from Forrester's Future of Work team. He's got some amazing research. We've been working with the Forrester consulting team to commission this research work exploring how companies across industries have used immersive and interactive technologies like real-time 3D, augmented and virtual reality to navigate the unforeseen challenges that we've been through in these last 18 months and how it's already starting to transform the future of work. JP will share some of the key findings of the study, help us better understand how visual computing is reshaping this future. And then he and I will chat for a few minutes and take your questions. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the event in the chat window. We'll get to as many of them as we can and follow up on the ones we can't get to. Now, the last year and a half has been a period of unprecedented change, not only in our personal lives, but COVID really upended the way everyone works and does business. And while maybe not everyone felt the impact of these disruptions in the same way, what we saw was those that had already embraced visual computing tools, platforms, and processes, or adopted them during the pandemic, were much better prepared to navigate through these challenging business times, as well as positioning themselves for the future. And the main reasons companies use these tools in the first place: increased productivity, improved collaboration across teams, faster time to market, driving down costs of physical prototypes, safety, quality, etc., have proved pivotal in the pandemic. Now, across industries and the spectrum of work phases, from design to engineering, marketing, manufacturing, and all the steps in between, we saw teams demonstrate amazing ingenuity, innovation, and resilience with this power of visual computing. And there are a number of remarkable stories that we have to share. I'll share just a few inspiring ones with you real quick before we get started. So the first example is an amazing project that converges the virtual and real world in the city of Paris. BNP Paribas, the real estate division, built an interactive digital twin of the city of Paris to build better client experiences to support those clients at a time when traditional ways of exploring, buying, and leasing properties were limited. What you're seeing here is a digital twin of the city, 10 million buildings, along with metadata and data visualization, featuring close to 35 years of compiled data dating back to 1997 and projecting forward all the way to the year 2030. Clients can fly through the city without being constrained by location or time. They can see everything that they know to make an informed decision around their next property. Occupancy rates, traffic flow, location information for mass transit, etc. It's all in the model. The second example that's equally impressive is around the automotive sector. Now, when in-person trade shows were canceled, many companies, almost all companies, had to let these significant revenue-generating opportunities go by the wayside. Not the VW Group. Particularly with the Volkswagen brand, the cancellation of the Geneva Auto Show, which is a key event for them, the automaker made history in hosting their very first real-time virtual motor show. Created in partnership with an agency in Dava, the real-time 3D showroom features digital twins of 36 Volkswagen vehicles. And well over 100,000 people from all around the world visited Volkswagen's website to take part in this brief digital tour. Now the OEM, the entire group of brands, continues to invest in immersive real-time 3D experiences in tandem with its physical events to create more accessible, sustainable ways, interactive ways to showcase its fleet of vehicles. Now, the last example is in our own backyard at Unity. We're a global company, and one of the most difficult pandemic challenges we had was how our engineering and design teams could collaborate across time zones and collaborate in the absence of being able to physically drop by somebody's desk impromptu or stepping into a conference room to interact and meet on a tough design or engineering challenge. Our XR team at Unity experienced this for themselves. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're the leading platform for real-time 3D development in the world. More virtual and augmented reality content is created on our platform than any other solution. And thanks to the wonderful work of our XR team, who create AR and VR tools, that when COVID hit, the team turned to these tools to stay on track and get their jobs done. They created a collaborative VR app called Project Hubble and used it to conduct weekly design reviews. And they can now take virtual field trips to explore and discuss ways to improve their XR products in an interactive and immersive space. So when you hear talk of the metaverse, it's a big buzzword these days. These experiences give you a glimpse of the potential and why people are so excited about it. And it's been inspiring for me to see the innovation that has come out of this challenging time. And I can't wait to see how teams continue to push the limits and innovate what's possible with these technologies. Now, for more insights on this topic, and to get to what you probably really all came for, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, JP. JP is a vice president and principal analyst with Forrester's Future of Work team. He leads Forrester's research into the impact that automation and emerging technologies from AI to AR and VR have on the future of work, jobs, and the economy. So with that, JP, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's wonderful to be here today. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our live event. For about 25 minutes, I'm going to share a variety of insights here about, as you can see, how the pandemic catalyzed enterprises to embrace immersive technologies. And I want to start out by making an assertion here, which is that for many different companies, in particularly verticals like manufacturing or retail, the areas that are going to have a physical in-person component, AEC, and we'll get into them in a moment, for many of them, as a result of the pandemic and improvements in technology, the new way of working is in fact becoming immersive. And that's a powerful statement. We're not 100% there yet, but throughout the pandemic time period, and as we look into the future, we're seeing indications that immersive and visual technologies are more important than they've ever been by a long shot. So let's get into the agenda. I want to talk about some of these buzzwords that are knocking around, right? We already heard metaverse. Take a sip of your tea every time you hear the word metaverse. But from digital twins to 3D simulation to augmented reality to virtual worlds, all of these terms are becoming important for a reason. And that reason is that we see more need for connectivity than ever before, for collaboration across distributed teams, for organizations to become fully digital and fully realized within digital. So all of these are angles on immersive technologies that are going to impact the future of how we work. And so we'll be going into some depth there. Now, before I jump into the full agenda, I just wanted to share the results of a question that we asked from some of the study participants. Again, I'm going to be sharing the results of a study by Forrester Consulting. And one of the things we simply asked was, across various industries, just briefly describe how your business is using immersive technologies. And what you find here is a very broad array of different kinds of responses. I won't read all of these, but to take a couple of examples from the manufacturing industry. They use it for workers to simulate a nearly identical work environment to manage complex and delicate processes so they can make this second nature and carry them out efficiently. In another instance, from the energy and utilities industry, AR/VR in our industry helps with inventory management and efficient work order management by guiding technicians through their work order in real time. Another company in transportation said, "We are better equipped to tackle adverse weather, plan routes effectively, and have reduced the number of accidents and casualties." So, some real return on investment there. But you can see that immersive technologies are becoming useful across a wide array of different business processes. And in fact, as is often the case, these users are finding new things every single day that they can solve problems using immersive. So, what I'd like to do is to give you a little bit of an overview just from our future of work perspective. The pandemic is a powerful catalyst here, but it's not the only shock reshaping the future of work. And so, I wanted to give you a brief intro to that. Then I want to prove that the pandemic actually did catalyze this excitement for immersive tech using some data from a study that Forrester Consulting created on behalf of Unity. I want to talk about the use of immersive and how it has increased already and why we think it's on the verge of, really soaring. A little bit of thoughts about how best to make use of these immersive technologies, and then what we think it means. So let's jump in by thinking about, broadly speaking, the future of work. We believe at Forrester that four shocks are reshaping the future of work over the next decade. And they are creating a need for organizations to be resilient, to be adaptive, and to be more creative at the same time. And all of those three things together implies a use of digital for sure, but as we will see, increasing use of immersive technology as well. So these four shocks that I mentioned, what are they? The first is systemic risk, and we're very familiar with this because systemic risk events are those things that come outside of the span of control of your organization, the pandemic being a very obvious one. Some of the things that have happened in the wake of the pandemic are themselves systemic risk events, like the supply chain problems, for example. And then there are things like climate events, that flooding or fires. There are political challenges and trade challenges. So all of these things are accelerating and they're creating new kinds of problems that organizations need to solve for. Second up is robotics and automation. Now, these can be a solution in part to some of these shocks, but they are themselves a challenge. How do I make sure that I'm able to take advantage of these technologies and use them? Again, here we find that immersive through digital twins, through simulations of robotics and factories, can help us to master the discipline necessary. Third up is employee or workforce data. There's a downpour of data available, and companies that use it well are going to be better positioned than those who don't. And finally, employee power. This means when you create an employee experience for the people who work for you, they are able to articulate what that experience is like. They share it on social media, they review your company. And right now we have a great resignation that means they could leave as well. So by giving immersive technologies to some of those workers, you're actually going to improve their lives and they will stick around. So all of these shocks sit in the background. They are what is changing the who, the what, and the where of work and how it is happening, as we've seen with the pandemic, but it won't just be the pandemic. I also want to point out that the systemic risk event of the pandemic actually accelerated leaders' focus on responding to change. So we asked people about the importance of the business initiative of accelerating your response to change. And 4 out of 10 said that they had increased it. And another 4 out of 10 said that they had kept it constant. We have conversations every day, though, with companies who are saying, we now get it. We understand that being able to very quickly adapt, be resilient, and enable creativity on behalf of our workers is crucial to our future. So finally, of course, many of us are working in a more distributed fashion. Forrester believes that 70% of companies are going to expand what we call anywhere work, the ability for employees to be working wherever they choose. 10% of those will be kind of remote first, very radical models. Most of them will be hybrid work. And guess what? When you're working on hybrid work projects, it can be challenging to overcome that distance without use of both digital tools, but increasingly the use of immersive technologies. Here you hear about virtual worlds or digital twins or the metaverse, for example. So, with this backdrop, I want to introduce you to some themes that we learned from the Forrester Consulting study, where we did a lot of quantitative work to try to understand these trends. And what we found is that the pandemic has catalyzed excitement and usage and understanding on the part of enterprises for immersive technologies. It's created a new sense that these technologies are valuable, and it has led to exploration and, in fact, deployment. So, who did we look at? We conducted this quantitative research. We looked at people from a variety of countries that you can see on the left, all over the world. Mostly these are going to be very senior people, all of whom are at least a manager or senior manager level or above. And we focused on some industries where we know that immersive technology is important, from manufacturing and retail to energy, utilities, transportation, and AEC. And all of the people that we surveyed in this study had decision making authority over the technology used by their organization to support work. And they also had knowledge of immersive technology adoption. So, by surveying these folks, we found out some interesting things. Now, as we all know, COVID-19 made collaboration and innovation challenging. What we didn't know was that it happened really across every possible phase of work that your organization engages in. Everything from marketing and selling activities to skills capture, production, operations, engineering, and design. All of these different phases of work have been disrupted. The work as usual was disrupted at a high rate. You can see that a majority for all of these work phases. So that's interesting. We also found that the disruptions caused negative impacts, but also led to certain forms of innovation, including with visualization tools. So here you can see the things in yellow are the negative impacts. The things that are in teal are positive impacts. So things like restricted access to products, raw materials, or buildings, we know that that happened. Drove a new focus on technology innovation. Well, that's right up there with the negative, disruption. And the very interesting one is that over half of our respondents said that it led to exploration of or experimentation with new visualization tools or techniques. Now you can see that that ranks even higher than some of the negative impacts like supply chain disruptions, which we are clearly still experiencing today, or diverting resources to protecting employee health and safety. So visualization in these verticals took on renewed interest, as we will see here. And in turn, leaders at these organizations rethought some of their goals. They wanted to solve problems for both their customers and their employees. So here in teal, we see customers. In gold, we see employees. And this means things like increasing digital marketing or e-commerce capabilities. Think, for example, about how retailers had to overnight change their process to do order online and pick up at the curb. Right, a huge change in business process that became really necessary last year and has continued to be popular after last year. It also did things for the employees, right? Improve remote collaboration across and beyond the organization, better leverage technology to increase employee productivity, digitize employee knowledge capture and transfer. So all of these things, as you might imagine, can play into the use of immersive tech to help to solve some of these problems, these new goals that organizations brought to the forefront as a result of the pandemic. So, what's the result? Well, the result is that 88% of organizations who were already using immersive in some fashion accelerated or triggered their implementation. So you can see here 54% said it accelerated our implementation, and 34% said it triggered an implementation. Right? So that's what Dave was sort of referring to, is this idea that immersive tech was already playing a role in the last 20 months of solving business problems by moving into a deployment stage. And by the way, when we think about immersive here, we're defining it, as you can see in the lower right here, as solutions that provide immersive visualization and simulation experiences that mimic real life. And this could be simulations of products or buildings, environments, data. It could be anything to do with 3D, VR, AR, mixed reality, digital twins, and the like, right? So we have a pretty broad definition, but all of these technologies are deeply intertwined with one another, and many of you may be using multiples of them to solve business problems. So we saw this big acceleration, this provable triggering of deployment. And we know that use of immersive increased during the pandemic, but it also looks like it will increase even more afterwards, right? So in this same study, we're able to get at not only what people did, but what they intend to do. So we see a move, for example, from merely physical collaboration to more immersive collaboration. This is a work in progress, but a lot of work has been done in certain cases. So before the pandemic, of course, in-person collaboration, physical modeling, think of, in the auto industry, creating a giant model of a car. This was the top way to collaborate on the representations of your products, buildings, if you're an architect, with maquettes and or processes. So what we've seen is that today, use of immersive technology for these purposes has already increased 18% relative to the pre-pandemic levels. So that's a pretty big bump. But what's really interesting is that over the next 12 to 24 months, the respondents tell us that they expect a 42% increase over today's levels, which is already up, and 68% over pre-pandemic levels, right? So that's a really big jump in the implementation of immersive collaboration. So this is another way to look at that data. In the 12 months prior to the pandemic, we saw a 44-point gap between those who were using in-person and physical modeling and those who were doing any kind of immersive collaboration and modeling. Now, in the next 12 to 24 months, that will drop to 18 points. It's simply the case that in-person and physical work in this space is on the decline, and that digital and immersive is on the ascendant. So we're going to see a huge change here. And in fact, you could even extrapolate and say, eventually these lines are going to cross, right? Where it will become such a valuable tool set that we will someday see the digital and immersive be the go-to choice. We also looked at this in terms of some of those other phases of work I mentioned. One of the really striking ones was marketing and selling scenarios, which people are expecting to increase by 77%. Now we're moving from a lower base here because immersive selling is something that's rather new. But imagine that you're selling a B2B product, medical devices or something like that. You manufacture them. Being able to do complex visualizations has already been a thing in, let's say, automobile configurators. We're going to see a lot more of that happening, and it's going to be a more expected way. And it won't just be B2B, it'll be B2C as well. So the leaders that we surveyed expect this to grow at a very, very fast clip. So with all of that, that's a lot of excitement, that's a lot of growth, that's a lot of planning. But how do we best make use of these immersive technologies? Like where do we get our ideas about what you can do as you listen to this today? Well, we asked about this as well. And one of the things that we saw was that leaders themselves see heightened interest for immersive at every phase of their work. So I started out by saying there was disruption at every phase of work. And in fact, leaders are identifying that they can apply immersive technology, visualization to those phases. Now, here, the ordering is a bit different, right? So design and prototyping is at the very top. And that's in part because we know that those of you in design and prototyping and product development have the sophistication around 3D already. You've already been on this journey, and what you'll be seeing is better tooling, more sophistication, more connectivity to data, that sort of thing. It's going to become more mature. But some of these other areas are not as familiar in the immersive space, and yet leaders see a lot of promise here. So whether that is marketing and selling, or the running your operations, the same categories we've talked about before, we think that there's going to be salience for immersive tech to solve problems at those work phases. Training, simulation, and collaboration lead the specific use cases that we asked about. So here we asked these leaders which of these use cases for immersive technologies are driving your interest. And what you can see at the top there is immersive training for employees. Imagine a factory where bringing somebody who's a trainee onto the factory floor is dangerous. It can be distracting to the people working there. And in fact, people can get into all sorts of issues of safety and hazard. In this instance, we're finding that that is a powerful tool for onboarding and ongoing training. Creating interactive 3D simulations, similarly, right? Where we can work together in this shared space, very powerful. Remote collaboration and empowering customers to interact with and customize products were also very powerful. So there's a wide array of things here that people want to achieve, but a lot of it is focused on employees and customers, and you can see some of the specifics here. We also found that leaders have largely bought into this immersive future of work. So this is quite interesting. In the darker green, the percent who believe each area will describe the future of work over the next 3 years. And in the lighter green, the percent who believe immersive tech can help solve or significantly enable each area. As you might expect, these numbers vary together. Things like innovation via the adoption of emerging technologies will become a significant competitive differentiator, right? And this comports with conversations I have with leaders as well, that they're looking for something not just to sort of survive challenging times, they are looking to thrive and to beat their competitors. Demand for metaverse-like digital experiences that intersect with the digital world will grow. Now, we know that there's a lot of hype around the term metaverse. That's not to be denied. But there's also a real there when you think about it in an enterprise collaboration context. Spikes in systemic risk to our organization will become more common, and customer expectations for self-service capabilities, like the ability to configure and view products on their own, will grow. So all in all, the picture we're getting is a pretty bullish one, where we're seeing that leaders have, moved on, accelerated efforts, solved problems, and they see this as an important component of the future that they are building for their companies. So the future of work is immersive. At least 40% of the companies that we talk to have plans or have already implemented emerging technologies like digital twins, 50% of whom have done that. Computer vision, very common now, interactive and 3D visualization, and AR or VR. So every day I'm having conversations with leaders who are trying to figure out what combination of 3D immersive visualization technologies they can support, that they have the skill sets for, and that they can solve business problems with. So I guess this is all by way of saying this is an opportunity for you to begin to differentiate, particularly if you happen to be in any of the verticals that we surveyed in this study. So what does this mean? I mean, at this point of the market, although those of you here today, just by virtue of your interest, are sort of ahead of the curve, I think it's still quite early here. I mean, we're still building, as Dave said earlier, digital twins of entire cities, to do planning, many different business processes, every phase of work that we looked at. So I think that you're still going to be an early adopter if you are jumping into this in earnest, if you're creating solutions to business problems. You're also going to be differentiating yourself, however, by putting together all of the skills and technology and processes to make immersive a part of your business. You are going to be effectively differentiating yourselves. And I think it's important to just note that while the pandemic, again, still ongoing, it was merely a catalyst for people to take a look at how immersive tech can really solve some of their problems. But now I think it's time to innovate, right? It's time to say, okay, we understand now. We're in a new space. Immersive is on the agenda. Let's connect our employees across many of those different phases of work. Earlier, I mentioned that if you're a designer or you're, doing architecture, you're already starting to be familiar with this. But are you in liaison with your customers? Are you collaborating with business leaders at your organization? Are you connecting across every phase of work to understand the operational impact of the designs that you create? So that's an opportunity here from the process side. It's also an opportunity to transform the future of work at your company. There's no single future of work. It's always the future of work is what you do at your company, and using immersive to solve problems can drive up employee experience and can create differentiation. And finally, as we see these shocks, change our future, it also means that our customers are changing their needs, right? Customers are constantly changing what they need based on market conditions, based on preferences. And by using immersive tech, you have an opportunity to get more product to market more quickly, to stop the bottlenecks in your process by creating a digital twin and solving some of these supply chain problems. Ultimately, the goal there is to delight the customers and do it as quickly as you possibly can. So, with that, I'm going to invite Dave back in, and I think we're going to have a conversation together.
JP, you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
good. Thanks so much. That was spectacular. I have to tell you, I've been fortunate enough to be at Unity for 5 years, and every week I literally see the innovation around this technology, things I can't possibly imagine. But to your point, it really picked up over this last 18 months, and it's great to have you and the team go out and validate some of the things that you see and you talk to people about, but put some numbers and research behind it. Couple questions for you, and then we'll jump into the audience. There's the questions are piling up. First things first, what surprised you most about the research?
Yeah. Of course, as I said, I spend a good bit of time talking to customers in this area, enterprises that are doing work here. I was surprised at how much acceleration and triggering of implementation there was as a result of the last 20 months. Traditionally, visualization and immersive tech has been a bit of a hard sell, right? You have to get a lot of buy-in from not just the people who understand 3D technology, but all of the operations technologists, the operational leaders. It can be a wide range of different groups within an organization, depending on your vertical, but it's going to be business and operations as well as IT and design. And so, what it seems to have done is to create this moment where people woke up and said, uh oh, we don't have a lot of choice here, right? We have to go digital. We're all going remote, or many of us are going remote. There were, of course, essential workers who couldn't easily go remote, but the need for more distributed work, that 88% who said it either accelerated or triggered implementation, that's a very, very interesting finding. Now, these were the organizations who already had some, exposure to immersive, that 88%. But nevertheless, they made a leap forward and they saw the value. And I think what that means is that a broader group of organizations will continue to understand the value as well.
Yeah. As I listening, I also think about situations that I learned about along the way where companies or groups of people literally had no other choice. We have a luxury goods manufacturer we know and do some work with, uh, that design and bring to market high end luxury bags, and literally those bags were physically locked in a warehouse, and the designers were unable to get to them and hand stitch the prototypes, and so they just had to move because they had no other way to continue to do the innovation and the product development.
And I
I,
bet it worked pretty well, right? I mean,
yeah,
the thing is too, not only was it, it got them over the hump where they said, we got to try something, but a lot of people succeeded far beyond their initial expectations as well.
yeah. A great one there is it also the unintended consequences, retraining or upskilling a workforce that probably may not have adopted this kind of technology
Right.
at this point in their careers. Um, Curious about the 12%. Uh, any commentary or perspective, either directly or inferred, on why that 12% didn't adopt? Was it in specific industries? Was it use cases that just don't lend themselves well? What do you know about that?
Well, yeah, it's all inference here, right? We have to just think about who we've been talking to. We have to remember that a certain number of companies hit a point of financial devastation. So my first guess is that there were companies that were, what we call the survival mode last year, and we know that almost a third of companies kind of were instantly stressed. And if you were to lose, some of your people, for example, that would make it hard. Although, the best way forward is usually to innovate your way out. However, in some cases, those companies may have been struggling financially. We also know that there could be cases where perhaps you don't have the right data, right? So data can be, whether that's 3D visualization data, whether that's instrumenting equipment in the field to get the data to create a digital twin or something like that. That can be a long road. So it could be that they've already overcome that since we took the survey, but it may extend the time horizon. So there's certainly challenges, but the fact that 88% said, we actually jumped into this, I think is quite striking.
Yeah, yeah. Number of healthcare workers out there and first responders and the public servants that we're all so grateful for. Many of them I know, some of them I know personally were heads down and, working, multiple shifts. That being said, the ability to quickly train healthcare workers and emergency room assistants and nurses and doctors in new techniques to ventilate, as an example, is
Right.
something that was implemented with these immersive technologies. So interesting.
And we
Do
saw
you-
that in the data, right? I mean, we saw that the number one driver was in fact training and onboarding and being able to do the knowledge capture, because we're also in this moment of great resignation in healthcare, unfortunately, because of burnout. For other people, for because they've rethought their lives or they want a more remote position, like there's a whole set of reasons. But it means that attrition is up and people need to onboard new talent. And the old way of doing things is kind of old and defunct.
yeah,
Again, as we see a continuation of these shocks, you're going to have all these different moments where you're going to be adding staff or losing staff. So having training that moves toward this direction can be very powerful. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a static environment. Companies are actually doing onboarding exercises in the metaverse, so to speak.
yeah. Let's make a transition to some of the questions that we've got from the audience. I'm going to the first one is, what are the biggest remaining barriers to mainstream adoption? But I want to rephrase that relative to what we've seen in the last 18 to 24 months. Do you think this would have happened without this crisis? Number one, and maybe said differently, are there other things happening that are making this technology more accessible? There's somebody from the Quest team, I think, in the group this morning. The fact that you don't have to have a tether in the back of your head, or the fact that some of these things are, accessible, even more accessible with lower cost mobile devices. Are there things pushing this forward that, drive it in the future, and are there still barriers we need to get over?
So, I mean, I think to your earlier question in that sequence, this would have happened anyway. There's a real value proposition for solving these problems, and the way I would think about it is this: Sure, getting together in person has certain social value to it, but it can be expensive. When it was safe, and hopefully it'll be safer in some near term future, you're still going to move people around, maybe from a global basis. It can be expensive. And the thing about digital is that you can audit what everything that's done, what steps were taken. You can give people kind of superpowers, if you will, like more of what's going on in digital. You can get access to data and visualization that you couldn't do in person. And eventually these things will hybridize. We'll have some element of in person, and but the digital piece will always be getting richer and richer. And that is another piece of metaverse, right? Where you think about it not just as these occluded digital worlds, but how do we bring AR into the physical space, or mixed reality?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that the trajectory would have been longer. And I think a reason it would have been longer is both organizational in nature. Companies, are going to take a while to make these transitions. But what's changed, number one, we had this vast investment by almost every company that was not in survival mode, right? That was doing okay, but realized that there were new business challenges. They invested so much in digital, in cloud, in upgrading data, in understanding, let's say visual technologies, computer vision. They added talent. There is still, a talent gap. I mean, I'm sure the same is true for your products, where it's like, hey, we wish even more people were expert in this, right? So that's still an ongoing process. So getting that talent is important. But all in all, these companies are in a space where they understand that the worst case scenario can happen, that digital is going to link us together, that they're going to have a permanently more distributed workforce, and they've already seen at least examples of how immersive tech can solve some of the hardest problems.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. All these questions are great. I love this one. I think we both probably have a point of view on this. Obviously, you're our guest today, so I want you to take up most of the air. But I'll read it. In order for immersive technologies to be holistically implemented, all of the supply chain need to be involved in the digital collaboration. Do you think the drive should start from the supply chain or from the client?
Yeah. That's an interesting one. And I think it will vary depending on what your ecosystem looks like, right? I mean, it rather depends. So, just to take a non immersive tech classic example of, companies in retail that have tried to get, let's say, something like, the Internet of Things, so getting RFID tags into their supply chain, that it takes a long time to do that, right? If you have complexity in your supply chain. So someone needs to start out with a vision. Someone needs to start out with a business case that says, here's why we're doing this, and here's how it's going to benefit all of us. Here are the problems we're going to solve. And we have a sort of starting point or talent base where maybe we've built an application that we want to start to onboard different partners. That can be an approach. And I'm using a retail example. But it may be that in other verticals, that maybe that's not quite the same. Maybe they're more regulated. Maybe there's some sort of regulatory body that needs to buy in to this solution. Maybe there's data sharing that needs to happen across the supply chain before, like, in other words, chicken and egg. You can't buy this because you need the data from the supply chain to do it. So I'm curious what you think as well, but I don't know that there's one single answer to that, except that there probably needs to be someone who is the visionary in this situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that vision, the visionaries actually, they're all over the place. And to your point, this idea of having a very focused, all in effort to get closer to your clients in a sales and marketing use case, make it immersive, tell the story about the product, and everybody's all in. Yes, that's something that happens. I think in a lot of these industries that we serve and that you surveyed and we interact with, their their end product is a manufactured good and a delivery service on top of that in some way, shape, or form. And immersive technologies aren't anything if they're not connected to a bill of materials and a supply chain where it actually physically gets put together, it's delivered, it operates, and you interact with it. And so I think it's a critical element. Back to these visionaries, I find them all over the enterprise. I happen to know about the automotive product development workflow by chance. And up until this technology really became started to become pervasive, the design group designing a new model, and the engineering group that was responsible for something like the powertrain of the vehicle didn't have the capability to work collaboratively. A
Mm.
designer would throw the design over the wall, and the powertrain engineer would try and make an engine fit. And so I've seen multiple times those groups come together on their own and just say, we're going to change the nature of work. As that industrial product gets manufactured on a line, a safety inspector or a union trade leader might be responsible to make sure that there's workplace safety and methods and training that go on to make sure that the manufacturing workers don't bend over and injure themselves, as an example.
Right.
So I see a lot of groundswell, visionary work, innovation happening. Just people knowing that they can make their piece of the job better.
Yeah. And you mentioned the sales and marketing piece, which I think is very interesting. There are there are distributed models where maybe you have a distributed sales force, maybe you have franchisees or contractors. There was a company that does that makes decks for your house, and they've been using AR for several years to do this. And the opportunity there is to go, and you're a contractor. You have this cool app. You show the homeowners what the deck they ordered is going to look like, and then you show them the next best one. Step up, and you say, wouldn't this look even better? And guess what? They decide to buy the better one. And the opportunity in the future is to link all of those decisions right to the supply chain, so that the minute they put in that order, everything is in progress to get all the right pieces and lower the time to value for the customer. So I could see that happening very much beyond these sort of more deeply technical areas, just into selling relatively low tech solutions.
Yeah, great example. For the group that's helping us here, I'm gonna go out of order in terms of the question, so just beware. Sorry about that. Um, there's a question from the group about opportunities for individual developers outside the enterprise. What are your thoughts there?
Developers have a lot of opportunity. I mean, to learn the skill sets here, as I mentioned, look, this is realistically something that there's a talent gap in a lot of different areas, but people who really understand 3D, have experience, know the tool sets, being able to apply that, this is very valuable. Actually, in our little green room before this webinar, we were having a chat about this, how there's game developers who are really adept at using these tools. And in fact, this is a great time to be thinking, hey, gaming has its value, but there's a lot of opportunity in enterprise to take all of the things that you've been doing and apply them to these problems that we've been talking about for this hour. So individual developers have an opportunity to skill themselves up, to position themselves within the opportunities I talked about today. By the way, you'll be able to read and download the full study soon and learn more about it. But if I were an individual developer looking in this space, yeah, I would be looking to say, how many of those different work phases can I apply myself to? How can I get experience in these verticals? And where's my, where's my differentiation? Maybe I am that 3D expert.
That's great. A lot of use of the term metaverse these days. And for those of you who haven't, go out on YouTube and the various media outlets and look for Iceland's commercial parody about the metaverse. It's fantastic. It's fun, and it brings you back to real life for a minute. Um, in metaverse collaboration scenarios. Any feelings about the demand or use of face visualization, humanoids, showing your face with vivid eyes, facial expression from customers, anything around bringing the human element into the research.
Yeah. So, look, there's going to be an initial wave of resistance around this. And that is to say, there already has been some blowback. People are like, I don't want to be an avatar. I don't want to be digital and all this stuff. I think that that will fade. I think some of that is associated with specific vendors and their reputations. I do think that there's, as we know, an uncanny valley problem, right? We don't want to create a sock puppet of ourselves that creeps people out. All of those negatives aside, in the long run, I am a believer that these things will matter. Just take one example. We fly people all over the world, including before the pandemic, me, to do in person collaborations and talks. The carbon cost of doing that is very high. We can't continue to do that in the future. We want to be able to work with partners and customers on an ongoing basis. We don't necessarily have the ability to convene those people in person. And it will be a permanently more distributed world. So ultimately, the ability to reflect various sort of human expressions, there will be a demand for it. And it's just a matter of working through this culturally. Much as emojis, I mean, hey, I'm 50 years old. I've been in the workforce for a long time. When I started working, there were no emojis. You would never consider using them if you knew what they were, right? Even a little smiley face in a business email 30 years ago, 25 years ago was not common. I mean, I'm emojing people all the time on my, on my team, even my clients. So I think that there is a need, a deep need for people to understand context, intention, emotion. It is part of the business, that we are in, which is communicating with other people. Do you agree?
I do, and what's interesting is we're now, at least at Unity, we're now starting to very rapidly uh, go into this new world of hybrid work, a combination of what we're doing here today in terms of a virtual experience with physically getting back out there. And kind of one of the lasting lessons for me, actually, there's a question from the audience. What are the lasting lessons from the pandemic? One of them is that as pervasive as this is becoming, as quickly as immersive, real time, interactive experiences and variations or pieces of the metaverse or interactive destinations coming together, there will continue to be no substitute for physically sitting down across from each other or next to each other and working on things together. Um, there is no we are humans by nature, and there's this human connection. I actually think that this combination of what we've seen the world adopt over the last 18 months in its efficiency, its effectiveness, our ability to put some of these technologies to work, to not travel so much, to reduce the carbon footprint, to create better products more safely, to engage with buyers or partners or colleagues in different ways. That in conjunction with the ability to maybe on a more limited basis, but be physically together, the possibility here is that we have the best of both worlds. So
Right. And if you do it wrong, and you don't invest in the right technology to make that a good experience, you have the worst of both worlds. And I think, this is a conversation I have a lot with leaders at organizations. We are not going back, even if it were totally safe tomorrow and COVID disappeared. 2019 is the history that is not coming back. And the reason is that employees want more distributed work. They feel like they've proven that they can do at least part of the time work very effectively remotely. And so you're going to have this interim situation where you need to be able to collaborate with people, whether you are physically present or not. Any meeting of 5 people or more, you're probably going to have a remote participant. And while video conferencing has been wonderful, it doesn't solve all problems. It doesn't allow us to have the depth of collaboration that we would in a construct like a virtual world. It doesn't allow us to work on a common model if we are designing or trying to understand an operational process. So again, one of the things about immersive is it brings what you think of as superpowers into your world. Whether you are together, or not, you can collaborate on these incredibly complex models that appear to be in front of you and everyone wherever they are, and create really new value out of that experience. So for me, I think the lasting lesson here is that technology really can solve some of these problems. It does require investments in culture and in having the right values and processes. But I think people are opening their eyes now and seeing how powerful this can be.
Yeah, I think you're right. It reminds me actually, and back to the earlier question about opportunities for individual developers. Certainly, many opportunities there. I think it's also created an opportunity, much as the internet did, e-commerce, 2D e-commerce static websites did. I can't even remember the error now. I suppose it was early 2000s, but it enabled entrepreneurs, small businesses, people with great ideas to punch above their weight, if you will, in the e-commerce space. You could be a person that had a hobby of making handmade rings, for example, and sell and distribute your product everywhere. I think in this same way with these immersive interactive tools and experiences, a small proprietor who makes custom bicycles can express the beauty and capability and customization of his or her product in the same way going against a mega manufacturer. So I think that's the other opportunity that it creates for everybody. So JP, I want to thank you and the entire Forrester team for the great research. Again, fantastic work, a lot of validation of what we at Unity see and hear every week as we're out there around the world. I want to thank all the folks that joined this today and engaged and asked some really great questions. The ones we didn't get to, our moderators are capturing, and we'll find ways to get back to you directly with specific answers to some of your questions, to all of your questions. And the last thing I will say is, for your participation in this, we will make sure that a full copy of the study that JP and the team did will show up in your inboxes soon, and opportunities to go deeper on all of that. So we hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed being here with you and having the conversation. And be safe, everybody. Stay healthy, and soon again.
Thank you.